This is the Zoom Platform Podcast.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you were able to sit through our first podcast, thank you for joining us again. This is the Zoom Platform Podcast, Episode 2. I'm joined by Cameron Stark and Max Petrosky. So thank you for returning. Let's get started.
So let's see here. So we were talking earlier about it would be a really cool idea to do a sort of retrospective on video game consoles, and figure we can either go up chronologically or we could just start off with our favorites. I don't know, whichever one you guys want to do, but we figured that would be a pretty good topic to discuss. So did you guys want to talk about you want to start the NES, or do you want to go before that, or do you want to talk about more contemporary consoles that we grew up with?
Well, to be honest, I was thinking we should probably start with the 5th generation, as I think it's probably one of the ones the three of us are most familiar with. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I think that's, let's say, from 93 to 2000, 2001-ish, let's say from, the 3DO, the Jaguar, CDI, to the main ones, PS1, N64, and Saturn. The debate, though, will be whether the Dreamcast is technically 5th generation or 6th generation. Obviously, a lot of the ports it had were from the 5th generation era, but technically it's also aligned with the PS2 and, that era. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to talk about 5th generation, the technology, because that was when we were really getting 3D for the first time too, 3D stuff. I mean, the PlayStation was huge at the time for that, and of course the Saturn as well. Rest in peace. But yeah.
But yeah, the 5th generation is a really interesting generation of video game consoles for me, because you have a lot of interesting stuff going on. There's a saturation in the market of companies. So you have Nintendo, Sony, Sega, Atari, and the 3DO company, all competing for a slice of the pie. And 3DO automatically, disqualifies itself for any sort of success with its historically high. It's still the highest priced console of all time at $700, which is equivalent to about $1,160 in 2016 money. So there's that. The Atari Jaguar, which is another interesting anomaly, where I'm reading this here. The best-selling game was Alien vs. Predator, which only sold 50,000 copies. So they didn't even hit 100,000 copies, which seems to be pretty standard. But for at least a good selling game at that era.
It's actually an underrated game too. It's actually pretty well done. The original Aliens vs. Predator. That and there's another game on there, I believe, called Iron Soldier, which are, in my opinion, a little underrated.
Yes, I really want to get an Atari Jaguar, because the emulation for it out there really, last time I checked, it really wasn't that well developed. And I really want to try out Alien vs. Predator, because I remember that game is one of the very first video game commercials I remember seeing on TV. And you can find it on YouTube. It's the guys playing Alien vs. Predator. Vin Diesel's narrating the commercial.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's like the new Alien vs. Predator for the Atari Jaguar, And the guy gets spooked because his mom sneaks up on him. You don't see the mom's off screen and stuff. He's like, "Oh, Mom," And then the camera pans out to a medium shot of the guy playing the game, and he realizes that his mom's hand is just being dangled by an alien hand. His alien's holding the mom's hand.
The old Jurassic Park trick.
Yeah, it's like, Mom, and he screams, and the camera zooms in, and and then there's like a heartbeat monitor that flatlines and stuff. So, with the tagline, do the math, and
well, that's the infamous equation, right? Two 32-bit processors equals 64 bits. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, we forgot two important consoles from the era, too. Obviously, it wasn't as mainstream as the rest of them, but there's obviously the SNK Neo Geo Advanced Entertainment System and the Neo Geo CD, which they put out later as kind of a lower-cost version. But I think we should definitely touch on that, as well as, obviously, there's the portables from that era, even the Virtual Boy as well. But I definitely at least want to hit Neo Geo when we talk about some of these games, because Neo Geo, while not 3D, what's amazing is that thing lasted, I believe, from 1990 to 2004. I mean, they were still pumping out games for it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what's really fascinating is actually, if you look at on Wikipedia for the timeline for fourth generation, it goes from 1987 to 2004. So, definitely Neo Geo definitely had a. It's a really cool console because it's essentially, arcade hardware in your home, and there's literally no port whatsoever, no porting involved. It's the exact same ROM as the arcade games, from what I understand.
Yeah, well, same cartridges too. They the only reason why the AES cartridges didn't work in the MVS, the arcade system, was they on purpose changed them just a bit so people couldn't buy the cheaper arcade cartridges as opposed to the home-based versions. But if you bought these converters, they would work.
Huh, very interesting. I didn't know that.
Now, how does that compare to Sega's systems? Because, obviously the Saturn and Dreamcast, at least, both had... I don't know if they were ports or if they were, the actual arcade versions of, of Sega arcade games.
Well, it's kind of close because the Dreamcast, I know, was built on the Naomi board, arcade board, essentially. So they're close. I think there's some minor differences, but I think it's about the same thing. I think what made the Neo Geo so unique was at that time, especially in 1990 when it first came out, that it was just unheard of. Because when you played arcade ports on Genesis or the Super Nintendo, they were obviously very toned down in terms of graphical quality, among other things. Even content, just from, obviously that was when ESRB and all that first came into play, but mainly from a technical level, they just weren't the same. Yeah,
and that was even the case with N64, because I remember we were talking about the Cruisin' games last time, and I remember getting Cruisin' USA. I think I rented it from Blockbuster, and I was like, oh, I remember this game, playing this on the arcade, and I played it on N64, and I was like, oh, this is really different. The graphics were really different. It was there wasn't as many. I don't even remember what the differences were. I just remember being underwhelmed, feeling like this is not the same as the arcade.
Yeah, with Cruisin', they didn't do as great a job with the ports as they should have.
Yeah.
With the Rush series, they did a great job, but with Cruisin', it didn't cross over. And I think, if I remember right, one of the first games they demoed to show off, I think at the time they were calling it Project Reality, or the Ultra 64, would eventually be
the Ultra 64,
Nintendo 64. That Cruisin' USA was one of the first ones they showed, but they kind of got in trouble because, if I remember right, they were showing it on the arcade hardware. They weren't showing the N64 version yet. And they made the same mistake with Killer Instinct as well.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Go ahead.
I know the arcade port, or the original version. I know that has the Nintendo Ultra 64 logo on it. Back when it was called that. Kind of promoting it, saying, hey, we have, the hardware. I always thought that was interesting. You think it'd be kind of serendipitous to, just port it, and it'd be pretty straightforward. But it seems like both games were, the N64 port, which they were promoting, really wasn't as good as the arcade port.
The other thing too, not to bounce around here, but one of the other key points about the Neo Geo is they were advertising it was the first console with 24-bit true color, which the Genesis and the Super Nintendo couldn't do. And I think that was something else that didn't come into play with the main consoles until the N64, PS1, and Saturn era, that true 24-bit color.
Yeah, and it was definitely... and even with this generation, with the fifth generation, we really, even though 3D was finally a thing, everyone still kind of handled 3D their own way. Like with the N64, that coprocessor, it's really interesting because it was notoriously difficult to program for, and it really does a lot of stuff differently than like other consoles. Like it does the anti-aliasing and stuff like that, whereas Sony's DPU just like it does that. Cameron, you know this a lot more than me. It does that glitch where it kind of extrapolates textures and fudges polygons a little bit, so as the camera's rotating, polygons become distorted.
PlayStation or N64?
PlayStation.
Oh yeah. The PlayStation had the affine texture distortion and lack of floating point precision. Because other future consoles had, for the pixels or the polygons had floating point precision, which allowed for more precise, or the vertices, not the polygons. The vertices had more precise. What do you call that? They were more precise in 3D space. They moved more precisely. Whereas on the PlayStation, it didn't have floating point precision, so they were just simple. They were just like integers. So it would only move to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the vertices would all jump around.
Well, I think that was
cause that effect.
Partly because I think it was called the Geometry Transform engine, or some. I think that's what it was called for the PlayStation. And it's running everything on triangles. Where, I obviously I know I'm in the minority here, but I actually preferred the N64's look, even with the anti-aliasing. And I know the N64 dealt with quads, where the PSX was, and even the Saturn, that was all about working with triangles. And just to me, the N64, I know it had more of a cartoonish look, but it just seemed, again, I know this sounds weird saying, because everyone thinks the N64 is fuzzy, but to me, it seemed clearer or better interpreted by my eyes than the PlayStation. The PlayStation always felt forced together and blurry, which I know, like I said, people say that about the N64, but to me, the aesthetic of the N64, the way it handled the quads as opposed to the other consoles with the triangles, I just preferred that look.
Well, it's interesting you say forced together because, the PlayStation isn't even really 3D. It's not, they touted it as it's the first 3D console and all this stuff, which it wasn't even really, but it really wasn't, because the PlayStation is simply faking 3D. It's not even really 3D. Everything is just popping up. You don't I've seen people ask in forums before if anyone has ever extracted models from 3D PlayStation from PlayStation games and stuff like that, and people say no, you can't, because the data is on the CD in such a way that there's no 3D information on the disc. The PlayStation takes the code and everything and it brings it all together and makes it look 3D. I'm not exactly sure how it all works, but that's what I've read, is that the PlayStation is not actually showing it in 3D. It's just like an optical illusion, basically.
So in a way, it's kind of like the 3DO, where I think a lot of the criticism about the 3DO was it technically wasn't 3D as well, because it doesn't have a triangle-based. I think it's raster sizer is the way to say it. I think that may be it. I think the Saturn. I'm trying to think here. like you said, it's kind of faking it, and that, maybe that's why I didn't exactly like the effect, the way it looked. I just remember the N64 being. Again, I guess the best way to put it is, I could, as a kid, I could interpret the images better. It was easier to find things because everything just kind of meshed together on the PlayStation. It was hard to differentiate objects or things in the dark.
Yeah, well, and the N64 definitely it did objectively the technology is better, definitely. And it does, quote unquote, look better, because the math is just better. Everything is just it's a more powerful console. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, the Nintendo 64 was just, I mean, both that and the GameCube were just way ahead of their time in terms of the technology running behind them. And I know a lot of people say, well, the N64 was held back by their decision to use cartridges. I disagree. I mean, technically, yes, that is true because obviously CD-ROMs, that changed the whole business of delivering games. That whole model changed because of the low cost of optical media. But at the same time, I think it forced the developers to be more creative, and I think you got much better music. Because I think these guys, trying to create, you had to literally write music that the machine would play itself, as opposed to just making music for the game and just having it play. You had to, work within a certain framework to get that to happen. I think the other thing is too the no load times. That I think that was very underrated at the time, and I think
that is huge.
And I know it cost a little more to create the cartridges, but again, I think that helped in somewhat of their quality control. Obviously, the N64 doesn't have nearly as many games as the PlayStation, but the question is, how many great games are on N64 and how many great games are on PlayStation? There's a difference there too, just because of the amount of I believe from a percentage basis, the N64 is a higher quality library. But again, that's just me.
I think well, first off, I agree that the N64 was definitely the more powerful of the two consoles. It may have been fuzzy looking, but at least it wasn't as hell pixelated like the textures were. A very jaggedy appearance that the PlayStation gave off. I think a lot of the, like you said, having stuff on cartridge, it forced developers to fine tune their products even more and make sure they were good. And there was another thing I wanted to say. Like you said about music, the two Konami games come to mind specifically. When it came to their ports for PlayStation. Because when PlayStation came out, everyone's like, oh, holy crap, we could finally put CD quality music in our games. And for Snatcher and Lethal Enforcers, that's exactly what they did. They went ahead and put CD music instead of the chiptune music that those games are known for. The Sega CD version, for Snatcher, does have some CD music, but the rest of the music is FM based, and Lethal Enforcers is the arcade port and the Super NES port are sample based. But when they went to the CD soundtracks, They went with completely different arrangements for Snatcher, so a lot of iconic songs that you would hum to and stuff, they were gone, and replaced with this drab CD music that really wasn't that great. And then the arrangements for Lethal Enforcers are okay, but they're still not exactly the same as the arcade ones. There may be some minute differences, but overall it's distracting. You're trying to play, and it's also. With Lethal Enforcers, it's a rail shooter, so the music has to keep on playing while you're playing the game. So they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't write additional music. You would think that would be like a no-brainer. Like, okay, we need to write an expanded 5-minute song instead of taking a 30-second loop and then just looping it over and over again. So a lot of developers, I really think, didn't know what to do when they had CDs and go, oh my god, we have all this space. I think a lot of I think people who were more accustomed to PC games and full motion video developers, I think they were more ready to take advantage of what the PlayStation could do than other more traditional developers.
No, agreed, and you're absolutely right too. The full motion video, obviously, with Mega Race being one of our mutually, favorite titles, right? I mean, that was, I think, the game that did FMV the best. But obviously, that's another big part of this generation. With the exception, if we forget the N64 for a second, with the PC, PS1, Saturn, FMV was huge. You had, of course, I'm blanking on some of the titles, but what was it? What were they called? Do you guys remember that one? They're in space. Obviously, there were a lot of those, but man, I am blanking. There was one in particular. I'll remember it in a second. But there were some really neat ones that they obviously Wing Commander and others. But there was another one I was trying to think of. But that was a big part of this generation.
Early Command and Conquer games had that was all about FMV.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were. Trying to think of that other one. I'll remember it.
Well, I was going to say, in regards to music quality on N64, definitely first-party N64 games that were developed for the N64, definitely, like you said, Jordan, they had to work with what they had, and so it produced good music because of the limitations. But I know I can speak to ports of N64 games that came from PlayStation or PC, arcade. I know when I was doing research on Resident Evil 2 for an article that I wrote, the N64 port is considered one of the best versions of that game for a couple reasons. One, because the pre-rendered backgrounds, for some reason, I guess because the N64 could handle the extra memory, the pre-rendered backgrounds are higher resolution than on any other platform on the N64 for that game. And also the lower loading times. But I think one of the negatives, though, of the N64 version that a lot of people complain about is actually the music, because they put so much into the graphics and the higher resolution backgrounds and higher resolution models also than the PS1 version. They had to crush the music, and so the music is like the worst out of all the Resident Evil 2 releases across the different platforms.
I see what you're saying. And obviously that's right there, Resident Evil 2. That's definitely a good example of that. But at the same time, obviously, to give you an example of where I think the N64 again forced the developers to be creative. There was a Spider-Man game based on the TV show. This is just before the movie in 2000. One of my favorite games of all time. It was on N64, PlayStation, and Dreamcast. And on Nintendo 64, they couldn't do the FMV. Well, not FMV. They couldn't do the cutscenes. It was all animated with the engine. But what they did instead were these cool comic book. It was like you were reading a comic book, and then they had these voiceovers, and it was really a neat way that they dealt with the technical limitations to do something unique. But you're right. I mean, there are a lot of cases where they weren't as creative, and like you said, with Resident Evil 2, they just forced it in. But Spider-Man's a great example of where, again, with that unique comic book display for the story, I thought that worked really well. And I also remember that FMV game I was talking about earlier is I'm going to probably say it wrong, but the Daedalus Encounter and Total Eclipse. Those are two games I was thinking of at the time. Like I said, I think Mega Race did it best because it knew it was campy, and the other ones, they tried to be serious, and I think that was the main problem there. or like Sewer Shark.
What generation was Tex Murphy? I'm gonna look that up. That was another like famous FMV series.
Yeah, I think it's this generation, Tex Murphy, and I think also this was the Star Wars Rebel Assault was also this generation, like on the 3DO, and that was FMV. There's also, by the way, an obscure FMV game that I believe was only on computer in the CDI called Voyeur, and it actually, you wouldn't believe it, but Susan's mother from Seinfeld is one of the main characters. So you get a kick out of that.
Grace Zabrowski, she's Laura Palmer's mom in Twin Peaks.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, there's another little factoid.
So yeah, which is funny because I can't believe I'm saying this on the podcast. Susan's father is Warren Frost, who's Doc Hayward in Twin Peaks, and also his son is Mark Frost, the co-creator of Twin Peaks. So there's interesting. I guess Seinfeld writers were fans of Twin Peaks or something. I don't know.
Well, it must have been.
One other thing I wanted to add about full motion video, it actually was possible on N64, and I'm looking at a video here right now. There's Resident Evil 2 had full motion video on N64, surprisingly. There's Pokemon Puzzle League actually had some...
Yeah, but not with real people, though, right? Because I just didn't remember. I didn't remember real people, though.
Real people,
Right, no.
Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune by Game Tech actually had Alex Trebek and Vanna White clips. And Gex 3 Deep Pocket Gecko has a it's actually kind of impressive. It's actually a UV map texture on like some control panel. It's actually some green screen actress. I have the volume off, so I can't hear what she's saying, but it's actually like a 15-second video playing as a texture on. It's actually kind of impressive for N64, really.
Yeah, I had no idea. Obviously, I played there was a Jeopardy PlayStation Network downloadable game, and I never played it on N64. But wow, I didn't know that was even done. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, I'll share with you the link. It's funny because I recognize this guy's YouTube channel. This guy also does a walkthrough of Mega Race. I remember his name. So.
Oh, Dragon's Lair. That's another FMV game too, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well,
that's
although
cartoon.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically it's film because that was back in the days when they had to record stuff on film, and then it wasn't digital ink and paint.
Yeah, I guess I just always associated FMV with Lance Boyle. I guess that's why I was thinking.
Yeah.
Real people. But yeah, I guess cartoons would count. I mean that makes sense.
And it's funny because like FMV, we think of real people.
Yeah.
In games, but even any kind of cutscene really is an FMV sequence. It's full motion video.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, but I think the best
that
part,
is a genre.
The best part of full motion video is definitely the good old Lance Boyle blue screen, green screen acting, shoot the tubes, dog meat, Dana Plato, Night Trap.
Mad Dog McCree, Area 51, those kind of uses as well.
There's a really good documentary. And of course I can't remember the name of it, but it is on YouTube. Just look up Night Trap documentary. And they talk about Night Trap and how they made the game, and it's actually really fascinating. Because they show behind the scenes footage for Night Trap. And, they treated it like a regular movie production. I think it had a budget of like $1 million or something like that. So it was,
wow.
I don't know if all that was allocated towards the production of the show. the full motion video, but they shot all of that on film. They still have the film elements. They were trying to do an HD remake, but that's a whole nother ball of wax. I don't know if we want to get into that, but but yeah, that's also pretty fascinating to watch as well. About if you're interested in the history of full motion video games.
I thought I recognized Mad Dog McCree, and I remember I watched Game Grumps play that. Had some funny moments in that series.
You know what I just remembered too? We didn't talk about the Apple Bandai Pippin. That's actually a very important piece of history. Obviously, this is when Steve Jobs wasn't at Apple, but one of the unique things was they had the marathon games on the Pippin. And once Steve Jobs got back, one of the first things he did was kill the whole Pippin project because it obviously wasn't selling at all. But the guys who made it, this company, I don't want to say the name just yet because I don't want to give it away, but they made these marathon games and they said, okay, let's try to do something else. So initially they had the idea, I think it was supposed to be almost an RTS game with aliens fighting on a planet, and then they were like, well, maybe this would work better as a third-person shooter, and then they went, oh, actually, this would work really well as a first-person shooter. So then Microsoft saw it, and that was Halo. But yeah, Bungie, if you can believe it, started off with Apple. They did it on their games on Macintosh, and they were one of the only people to support the Pippin. But yeah, then they go and make Xbox what it is. I mean, that always fascinated me.
I played the Marathon games as one of the few Mac games I played, and it was through an emulator.
They're pretty fun. I've played it on the Pippin. I mean, they're pretty good.
Yeah, no, they're phenomenal games, on par with Doom, possibly even a better story. I really like the.
They're kind of closer to System Shock, actually. System Shock 2. Like, they're a little closer to those.
Yeah, that's what they look like. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I definitely get that vibe. And they're very cyberpunk with the whole idea about. And they carry on that whole idea about AI and rampancy. With the AI is going insane after a couple years, much like the mortality with the replicants and Blade Runner and stuff. It's really really good storytelling and stuff. You had to go up to a terminal to read the story and stuff, or read the logs from the AIs and stuff. And but I didn't know they actually developed stuff for the Pippin. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't either. In fact, I'd never even heard of the Pippin until you mentioned it. I'm looking it up.
Really?
Oh, really? Yeah.
It looks like a VCR.
What's interesting is it was essentially a Macintosh computer. I mean, they're heavy. I have one. They're really heavy. And what's interesting is they did it like the 3DO. Apple didn't actually make them. They sold the schematics. So Bandai, before they merged with Namco or got acquired by Namco, I'm trying to remember whether they just one or the other. But regardless, Bandai was who did it in Japan. They had a white console. And then I forget who Apple partnered with for the US, and it was a black console. But the Japanese ones, they're actually pretty easy to find on eBay. If you want to spend like $300 or so, they're there. I mean, they're a bit expensive, but they're available. The black ones in America, those will go for like $800 or something, and they're hardly ever on eBay. Like, you'd have to really keep an eye on the for sale stuff to actually find one.
Wow.
Yeah, I really like the logo. It's colorful. It's fun.
And you should see the back of the console. I mean, it has all the ports like a PC would, and it's a tank.
Picture.
Yeah, it's a freaking tank.
It's interesting too. Looking at the numbers, only 42,000 sold. Which you think like, in comparison to another failed console, not necessarily a console, but handheld, the Virtual Boy, that had 700,000, sold. So it's like,
wow.
Everyone goes like, oh, the Virtual Boy, it's the least sold Nintendo, console or whatever, but it's like, it still beats a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, in comparison to others, yeah. I mean, I'd never heard of the Pippin. I'm the retro gamer guy. I mean,
the Pippin's really, really, really interesting. I need to look more into the history of it.
The predecessor was the Palladium.
Another thing I wanted to look more into is the Amiga CD32, which I know Cryo was developing a Mega Race port for it. And it supposedly was going to have... It's kind of sad because apparently that Mega Race port was going to be like on par, if not better, than the 3DO port. And because the 3DO port has the best video quality and it has the music. So I was it has the recorded music that Stefan Peak did, instead of just chiptune music, the MIDI music. But so I'm assuming the Amiga would have had the same thing. But there is a prototype out there. Someone does have it because they posted it on an internet forum, but I can't seem to contact that person. That was a long time ago, so their contact information is invalid. But in general, the Amiga CD32 is also a pretty obscure one. It's got a really interesting, almost like controller too. Almost looks like joysticks for an airplane or something. Like they have those handles that stick up, and it's a pretty interesting pad.
That actually leads me into a topic I wanted to bring up. What are your favorite weird, or they don't have to be weird, but what are your favorite third-party controllers from any era, really?
Well, I do they have to be third-party?
No, I guess.
Okay.
As long as they're not like the main controllers.
Right.
Well, admittedly it is a main controller, but we could go on about the Jaguar.
Yeah, no, the Jaguar controller is really fascinating, and it actually isn't that bad. But to answer your question, Cameron, I actually never really played with a lot of third-party controllers. I do remember the ones I did play I didn't really care for. Like, we had one for the N64. I didn't like that one.
The turbo one? I remember trying a turbo controller. Like, whenever we got a third-party controller like that, like there was a turbo one on the N64, if you're ever doing any split-screen games, which is, again, kind of why I think the N64 was the best console of this era, the 4-player split-screen, to me that was huge.
Oh, yeah.
Playing with your buddies on the couch. But whenever we'd play, it was always kind of like a, picking straws for, who's gonna get the crap turbo controller.
Yeah. What my favorite third-party controller that I saw that I wanted to get was there was a GameCube controller, and they had an ad for it in Nintendo Power where I actually had fans built inside and had vents on the control sticks, so it'll cool your palms.
Oh yeah, that's Nyko
cool.
Probably.
I thought it was Mad Catz that did that.
I know there was a Nyko controller for, I think, Xbox, or at least maybe from that era that had fans built in.
Cameron, I have an answer to your question that you guys just reminded me of. One of the greatest things about this era were the light gun games. I mean, you had the first House of the Dead on Saturn, Time Crisis on the PlayStation, but again, I know it's kind of difficult to argue here, but when the Dreamcast came out, whether it's this generation or the next one, because of Columbine, Sega didn't make light guns for the game in the US, so you had to get them through Mad Catz or Nyko or whoever. But I remember loving the Mad Catz Dreamcast light gun because that just worked perfectly. I mean, even comparing it to some of the other first-party ones on other consoles, to me, I just loved that Mad Catz light gun. It had like a little sight. I thought that was fantastic. So hopefully that counts to answer your question.
Yeah, no, it does. And actually, yeah, light guns. I remember I had 2 light gun games on PS2. And then I played another one. The first one I actually played was Starsky and Hutch, which was not a very good game, but it was actually a cool game though, because you could play that in a single same screen co-op multiplayer. One of you play Starsky, one of you play Hutch, and it supported a racing wheel and a light gun. So one player could be shooting with the light gun and the other one would be driving with the wheel. That was really cool.
Oh,
but
yeah,
the game itself wasn't that great.
Yeah, that was on Xbox, right? That was a really neat idea. If I remember,
Yeah.
I remember seeing that on Xbox. And I was trying to
Yeah.
think too of the other light gun games. Obviously, the Virtua Cop series was around Confidential Mission Force, which is actually my brother's initials.
Huh.
So he always loved that on Dreamcast. CMF, that was so cool. That Confidential Mission Force, that was great. I may have mentioned this on the last podcast, but GoldenEye was supposed to be a light gun shooter. In fact, you can even tell by the way it's displayed. I mean, that's initially what it was supposed to be, on rails, and so that's kind of unique how that turned into obviously the definitive first-person shooter of the era. But I was trying to think of some others as well. If I remember right, Sega, they were the first ones to do 3D polygons in a light gun game as well. With Virtual Cop, I believe.
Oh yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, before we stray too far from the controllers, the reason I brought it up was I was thinking about a controller today that I hadn't thought about in a while. And I think I'm pronouncing it correctly because on Wikipedia it shows the pronunciation. The Negicon for the PlayStation, and they might have made it for other consoles, but PlayStation definitely.
Do you mind spelling that so I can look it up?
Negcon, all one word.
Okay.
It is a bizarre-looking controller. It has a D-pad. It has the main face buttons, and then instead of analog sticks, in the middle it had this this rotating axis, and so you would twist the controller forward and backward.
Huh.
And it allowed for really precise controls in racing games. So you could really precisely turn the car left and right. I think that was all it was for. It was just for turning precisely left and right. You couldn't go up and down with it. But
That's
I actually
really
see a picture of it.
fascinating.
It looks weird, but I get what they're talking about. That might actually work really well.
yeah, and I never owned one, but there was one time when I was really little, maybe before I had a PlayStation, maybe, where my parents and I went over to this family's house. I don't even know who they were, but their son had a PlayStation, and there was other kids in the house, and we all were like sitting on his bed playing PlayStation games, and I still to this day have this memory in my head of us playing Twisted Metal, the original Twisted Metal in split screen, and he was using, of course, the main controller, and then he handed me this big clunky looking controller. I was like, what the heck is this? This thing twists? Like how am I supposed to use this? And it worked with Twisted Metal. Like you could twist the controller and you could turn left and right.
No pun intended there.
Yeah. Twisted Metal. But what's funny about that moment, that gaming moment in my life for me, was that still to this day, when I hold a controller in my hands, I still like kind of twist it a little bit when I'm holding a controller. Just from that one moment of holding that controller way back then, just one time, just spending like a couple hours in that kid's room with that controller, and still to this day, I feel like I want to twist a controller when I hold it.
That's funny. I know sometimes I'll do that with the controller, kind of like just as a nervous tick.
Yeah.
Or if like I'm like if I'm buying like a used GameCube controller, I'll do that to make sure it's not like well, it doesn't really do anything. I guess it just like makes sure it's okay. But I mean, it's ABS plastic. It's not gonna like degrade in like 1,000 years. So but
Just kind of scary when you think about it.
yeah, it's gonna live longer than you. But
there was also related to the Negicon. There was also the JogCon, which was bundled with copy, not collector's edition, special edition copies of Ridge Racer 4, Ridge Racer Type 4, whatever it was called. And it was a similar idea. It was a controller that had just the D-pad and the face buttons. but then in the middle of the controller, sort of at the bottom where you'd expect 2 analog sticks, it had just this one big giant dial, like you might see on like a VCR remote for tracking or something. And you would, I guess, use your thumb to, like, again, really precisely turn left and right. So it was used for racing games.
You know, that's reminding me too, obviously, starting with the Neo Geo, I believe, and more so once, you know, the PlayStation came into play and the Saturn, fighting sticks, you know, and having the buttons and the joystick at home. And obviously that was one of the big pushes for the Saturn with, you know, Virtua Fighter. And in a lot of ways, it kind of hurt them because by showing off Virtua Fighter, I think that really showed that 3D games, you know, at home made sense. And I think that helped the PlayStation a lot. You know, kind of promoting their own game might have just increased sales for the PlayStation.
Well, I know.
And the other thing too is, Virtua Fighter was in the arcade, I believe, before the PlayStation came out. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that, you know, because I think a lot of people, a lot of developers were probably saying 3D was, you know, high technology. You know, it probably wasn't going to make them any money, and, you know, they were still doing just fine with 2D games. I think Virtua Fighter changed things so that, you know, the PlayStation seemed more viable when, you know, when they were first pitching that around. So I guess that's more what I was getting at there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and even today, fighting sticks are still really popular, which surprises me. But then again, I guess it shouldn't, because I mean, fighting games are still popular. So,
well, fighting games are still popular, and also, think about the big breakthrough for Nintendo, right? They needed a new IP, Super Smash Brothers. Let's make a fighting game with all our characters. I mean, that started off. I think it was mainly. You remember how you'd fight those polygons? I think that's initially what it was, just a bunch of polygons fighting each other. And then
That's right.
Nintendo went, let's put in. Why don't we put in our characters? And boom, look at that. You know?
Yeah, initially, from what I remember, there was hesitation from the higher ups at Nintendo about should we really have Mario and Pikachu fighting each other. But yeah, it really did start up just as like some test game. For fun at HAL, where it was, you know, mannequin figures fighting each other and stuff, and like some of the test textures for like the background and stuff were like their offices or you know, something like that. Yeah, that was after the guy who created Kirby, who created the Smash Brothers, asked permission for putting the characters in the game. I think Iwata had help too in convincing higher ups for like, hey, let's get these, you know, characters and really make this game sell. That was a massively good idea because it cemented Nintendo in because you look at Smash and it's almost just as big as Street Fighter.
Or even you know, one of its contemporaries. I mean, I love Tekken 3 in the arcades and on PlayStation, and you know, to me, I mean, Smash Brothers is right up there with Tekken 3. I mean, those are two of my favorite fighting games right there.
Yeah,
it's funny. I actually played Tekken 2, but
yeah, same here.
But not on PlayStation. Yes, that's right. I played it on Bleamcast.
I played Metal Gear Solid on Bleamcast. It actually looked better. I mean,
it did.
Those guys were genius. I loved what they did. I mean, both from a legal standpoint, they knew what they were doing, and because they were able to, you know, basically beat them out. The only way they lost was because, you know, you just don't have enough money. Whether you're right or wrong, it always comes down to who has the most money to last in court the longest. But just great tech, great idea. I thought it was genius.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating too. I feel like we're bouncing off. There's like so many subjects to talk about, but that's really fascinating how they subverted, you know, any damages and stuff by, you know, the fact that it was an emulator, and emulators by their nature are legal. It's, you know, it's the copyrighted content that they can run. That's the gray area. But
Yeah.
but just saying, hey, we're just an emulator. That was a really genius move on their part. But yeah, like you said, they just didn't have enough money. But they definitely they implemented it well too, because like even the textures were anti-alias properly and stuff, and it like you said, the game, and they would tout that too on the back of the game, like it looks better on the Dreamcast than on the PlayStation, and they were actually kind of right.
If I remember right, too, I think Sony did eventually hire the main guy behind it, which is what, honestly, they should have done in the first place. Just, in my opinion, if a company, with obviously essentially unlimited resources, if they run into something like that, why go through this, all this rigmarole with the courts and just go, hey, look, all right, hey, nice work. You broke our thing. You know what? We could use someone like you. Why do they never have that response? They had to go through all this first. But, if it were me, I'd be like, okay. I'd have a certain respect and go, okay, all right, well, why don't you come work for us?
I think Nintendo did that with some guy that did an NES emulator.
You mean Rare? That's how Rare got started. That's what Nintendo did. They Rare reversed engineered a bunch of their games, and instead of, if I remember right, instead of yelling at them, they went, why don't you come work for us? I think that's how Rare got started, now that I think about it, yeah.
Huh. Well, that's funny because inside, I'm bouncing all over the place, but on Rare and emulators, some guy at Rare actually wrote a ZX Spectrum emulator for N64, and
hit it in GoldenEye, right?
Yep, hit it in GoldenEye. They just recently found that.
I think I remember hearing that.
Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. It worked, and it's got like 6 Rare titles too. So, I'm sorry. Go on.
Oh, go ahead. No. Finish what you're saying.
No, it's like the titles no one's heard of, but they're still Rare titles and stuff. But it's just fascinating that runs on N64 hardware.
Yeah, that's amazing that an N64 can emulate anything.
Yeah.
Well, it really is, it's a monster of a machine. I mean, it's just people don't realize it necessarily. I mean, like I said, they assume because of the cartridges that, it just can't do this or whatever. But, I mean, you have to mod it, of course. We can get RGB out of it, in terms of SCART video.
And HDMI.
I mean, it could, yeah, exactly. It can do a lot. It's a lot like the Dreamcast. And again, I think the 4 controller ports on both those consoles is something too that's also overlooked. Split screen gaming with friends and family on the couch, that is something so important to me personally, and I think the industry needs to get back to that. I think that's a huge deal, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. No, Cameron.
I agree, because I mean, even though I grew up more with the PlayStation, even though we did have an N64, and I definitely have fond memories playing Episode 1 Racer.
One of my favorites, by the way, Episode 1 Racer.
Yeah. Oh, I loved that game. I didn't have as much, since I didn't have siblings that played games, I didn't have as much use for 4 controller ports, but I did grow up playing games with my dad. And I mean, still to this day, now I think about it, my dad and I still play games online on PC. So just, I mean, whether it was PS1 or N64 or Xbox, PS2, I mean, we've played every console together. And it's always been, I mean, until now when I've moved out and now, we play online, but up to that point, we played games, on the couch together. And that was always important to me. And so that's why I agree. I still support local multiplayer for sure.
You and me were simpatico. Let's put it that way. I played split screen with my dad. When I visit, that's what we do. I mean, Rush 2049. I tell you how much I love that game because I was playing it with my dad and my brother all the time. We'd play GoldenEye together. There was a great game on Dreamcast, Looney Tunes Space Race. I mean, playing with your family, like you said, it was very special to play with your dad. Same here, because my dad, my brother, and I, we'd play games together, talk things out, like if we were talking about what was going on at school or whatever. I mean, it was just, it was more social than people might think. And like you said, you still play with him online today. I still play with my dad when I come to visit with him. We still prefer, if we're going to play with each other, console games. But I've tried to get him to do PC online games, but it just didn't work out.
Well, it's funny. People go like, especially nowadays, like, oh, video games are so antisocial, blah 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 blah. And I mean, hell, they were more social back then. I mean,
nailed it on the head.
It's absolutely flabbergasting. And I recently brought an N64 with Beetle Adventure Racing and GoldenEye to my manager's house. He was having a game night, and I brought the N64. We hooked it up to his TV, which still had composite video, thank God. And and the picture was really fuzzy thanks to the composite video. But we did 4-player Beetle Battle on Beetle Adventure Racing, which is still really fun. And we did like an hour-long GoldenEye multiplayer session. And he was getting used to controls. He's like, "Oh my god, I haven't played this in like literally 10 years or something." And remembering the areas and the maps and stuff, and that it's amazing how much life that console still has in those games. Especially considering how GoldenEye multiplayer was an afterthought. But
really,
it's amazing. Just. They had multiplayer right, and it's amazing how we gotten away from that. And really, the only really kind of good multiplayer experience you can get anymore is through like online PC. But even that. No, actually, I take that back because it could be really sketchy, especially if you're like playing with a bunch of kids or something. So yeah, like we had the perfect multiplayer gaming environment, and we need to get back to that.
And that's not to say certainly that some people, some companies, etc., aren't trying to still incorporate local multiplayer. I remember I read an article recently about it was either Halo 5 or maybe the next Halo. I don't know whatever the latest Halo is, or some Halo that's coming out. They made a point of saying like they're going to be putting split screen in it. They made like a big deal out of that they want to bring back the couch multiplayer.
That's what sold the game in the first place. Jeez.
Exactly. And I remember there was another company. It was a fighting game that recently came out. They were promised split screen just like that, but then they took it away at the last minute. It's by Ubisoft. I think it's For Honor. They kept saying, "Oh, we're gonna have split screen multiplayer, Then they pulled it the last minute. So if they really mean it, that would be fantastic. I mean, I'd love to have Burnout again with split screen. Racing and first person shooters, you got to have split screen. The other thing I missed too, GoldenEye's still my favorite, but what I liked about Perfect Dark was you had bots, because if you couldn't find anybody, like the situation you were in, or if I was at home alone, whatever, you still had bots, but you don't even have that anymore.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Oh man, and Perfect Dark, that was like one of the first games to do bots. Maybe not the first, but it was way ahead of its time because the bots were so bizarre. Like, remember, it wasn't just simple AI. Each bot had its own personality.
Yeah, didn't they have names?
I remember reading about it in a magazine. Huh?
Yeah, didn't they have like names and stuff to differentiate?
Yeah. They had different names, different play styles.
Like,
it was the basis for what would become Timesplitters. That was their whole thing. And Timesplitters, another very underrated franchise.
Yeah, I still need to play Timesplitters. I haven't. I always hear about it.
I mean, it is the GoldenEye. It's pretty much the GoldenEye team that left Rare at that point. I think Dr. Doak is even there, if I remember right. But yeah, the Timesplitters, with the monkeys and everything, that's another great series.
Yeah.
I was thinking too, not to go all over the place, but we were talking FMVs, voice acting, making things cinematic. Obviously, Metal Gear Solid was fantastic on the PlayStation. Another great soundtrack, to your point, Cameron, like Crash Bandicoot. But the other thing I loved about this was the first time we really got stealth games on the PlayStation. And everybody knows about Metal Gear Solid, but one that I played that I also liked was called Tenchu Stealth Assassins. And it wasn't perfect, but it was, the first attempt at that kind of Hitman thief kind of style. On consoles, that is.
I think I played Tenchu... One of the Tenchu games on PS2, I think. I think I played like a demo of it or something. But yeah, I don't remember the first game though.
I think it tried to do a little too much on the PlayStation, and I think that was the problem. But the concepts and kind of what they were going for is what impressed me. And if you put enough time into it, it was fun. It wasn't Metal Gear Solid, but it's a different play style too. It was, like I said, it's closer to, I would say it's closer to Hitman than Thief, but it had that same kind of vibe.
Yeah. Well, and then I'd argue that Splinter, the original Splinter Cell, I think really kicked off the stealth stint that we're kind of still on today, where like every game needs to have stealth.
Well, I think they were the first ones to really mainstream it. But to me, Thief the Dark Project in '98. Those are the same guys who do, obviously then the Metal Age, System Shock 2. I mean, that was huge.
Yeah.
Hitman from IO Interactive as well. Those are... Because Looking Glass Studios, they don't get enough credit, in my opinion, because
I agree.
both System Shock games, the Thief games, I mean, that really... Because with Hitman... Yeah, I mean, it is stealth. You have to be careful because you can be overwhelmed, and it's fantastic in its own regard. But with Thief, it was you're this weak character, and if you get seen, you're dead. I mean, it's not even a question, and you really felt nervous the whole time. And it really used the elements of sound well, to kind of hear things like if they're walking on metal or wood. But I mean, you just really felt scared for your life because you knew, you didn't have a chance. At least in Hitman or something or Splinter Cell, you don't have much of a chance, but you might be able to pull off a little Bond-esque kind of or Mission Impossible type thing. But with Thief, you really were no options other than to really be quiet.
Yeah. Well, and also it's known for, of course, just being a very realistic stealth game for the time, especially. How much Shadows played into being stealthy and sound and all of that, which Splinter Cell was also known for, but Thief did it first.
Yeah, and Deadly Shadows, it's a different developer, although I think they got Warren Spector back. He was kind of involved in the first one, but not really. Because the game just completely changed after he left, and Thief 2 was the same team. But then they went to Spector's new team to do Deadly Shadows. I don't like it as much as the first two, but it's still pretty good in its own regard, and I don't think people give that enough attention either. That was the one that was, I want to say it was 03 or 04 that it came out.
That's similar to Deus Ex, how everyone always hates on Invisible War. Even though it wasn't a bad game either, it just wasn't as good as the original.
True, and funnily enough, that's another... the first one was Warren Spector, the first Deus Ex.
Right.
And, the second one, I think it was Romero's company, if I remember right. But I could be wrong. I think it was John Romero's company.
Well, talking about... back to, local multiplayer, Max, one of my favorite... besides playing with my dad and stuff, still one of my favorite memories of playing local multiplayer games was when we were in college. And remember, we had the at the video game club, we had that. There was we only had like a couple of these meetings, but because for some reason they fell apart after the first couple. But remember, we had like the late night play sessions or something where this was even before the grid was created. We were like hanging out in like the open area and people brought TVs
I did one, and I remember some guy bringing in an Xbox that was modded that had millions and millions of games, and we played the whole Jurassic Park arcade game all the way through.
That was we did that on my laptop. We played it emulated on my laptop.
Oh, I thought it was on the Xbox.
No, it was on my laptop. Because that was what I was going to bring up. Was like I remember you and I sitting there playing the all the way through the Jurassic Park arcade. But I also remember I had Project 64 with GoldenEye on there, and I remember we had 4 wired Xbox controllers hooked up to my laptop. Somehow I had 4 USB ports on a laptop from 2009.
Wow.
And playing, I remember playing GoldenEye with an Xbox 360 controller was really an interesting experience.
Someone even found a way to, I think, with Project 64 to do online multiplayer with that through the through the emulator. Yeah, I remember that being popular.
Oh yeah.
And actually, I got in trouble because I set something up like that at our school computer system because everybody shared the same hard drive. So basically, everybody had a copy of that. They didn't find out it was me, thankfully, but they were pissed at whoever did it, and hey, we know that's out there somehow, but for some reason they couldn't figure out who put it there. But oh well.
Well, if whoever works for the school is listening now, it was Jordan. It was him.
You played yourself.
One of the things I thought we should hit too, by the way, kind of the definitive titles of the era. Obviously, Super Mario 64 is huge. It was open world. First of the analog control, that camera system that was just perfect. That's probably a good one to start with. I was trying to think of some others. I think Castlevania Symphony of the Night on PlayStation, that was a game that proved 2D could still be relevant, and still be great. Because that was another fantastic game. Obviously, the first Gran Turismo.
Yeah.
I think those are probably good ones to start with. I'll let you guys take it from here.
Well, Gran Turismo and Super Mario 64, you just named the best sellers for those consoles.
Yeah.
They're...
So I do know I am good at business.
I'm double checking here, but Mario actually sold more than Gran Turismo. 10.85 million units for Gran Turismo and 11.62 million for Super Mario 64.
I think GoldenEye was around 8 too. I mean, those are some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
or definitive titles.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, one. And pushing forward a little bit to PS2, you can't talk about the PS2 without talking about Grand Theft Auto 3.
Very true. Yeah. And it's funny, you were talking about Driver that did the open world first, but Grand Theft Auto, that 3 is what took it to the next level. No pun intended.
Yeah, it really, Grand Theft Auto 3 really just pushed the envelope in every way.
I thought of another one, too, from this era, Ocarina of Time.
Majora's Mask.
Nights into Dreams with the 3D Saturn controller, which eventually pretty much became the Dreamcast controller. I think that's another one we should mention.
Huh.
Yeah, if you
or the Panzer Dragoon Saga. That's another. I don't mean to go all Saturn, but that's another one.
No, that's another good series too.
Well, in Dreamcast, you got Shenmue, Jet Grind Radio, or Jet Set Radio.
That cell shading in Jet Set Radio. I love that.
Yeah,
Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
Crazy Taxi. Oh, you want to know a funny story about Crazy Taxi?
Yeah.
One of my favorite games of all time, because I'm just a Simpsons nut, is the Simpsons Road Rage. Which was basically Crazy Taxi. There was even a little legal battle over that. But that's
really?
Just, between Sega and EA. Because
what happened with that?
I think
I'd never heard of it.
I think it was. I don't want to say the exact details because I'm not sure, and I don't want to get sued. But I think it was closed. It was taken care of behind closed doors. But the argument was by Sega that hey, you basically just did Crazy Taxi with Simpsons characters. But it's funny because Take-Two Interactive handled it better because another great Simpsons game is Hit and Run, which is just Grand Theft Auto with Simpsons characters.
Yeah, although not as good, but
I
enjoyed
it a lot.
Road Rage. I enjoyed Road Rage more, but
I think they're both good for different people. I mean, if you're a GTA fan, I mean, I'm a Simpsons nut, so I'm probably a bit biased, but I thought they're both great. But I know what you mean. Road Rage was a blast, and that's another great multiplayer game.
Yeah, they're both good games. Again, comedy. If you want a good comedy, that's definitely Hit and Run and Road Rage are definitely go to. Crazy Taxi is a really interesting title. It's a great arcade port. There is one thing I've always noticed. It happens every single time I play the game. And I just played the arcade version at Disney Quest, which is now closing in a couple of days. But it doesn't do it on the arcade version, so it's definitely something with the GameCube. The Dreamcast hardware. And it's when you're in the one area, there's like a little grass section before you hit the park, and you go up these steps, and there's the park and the parking garage. There's like right after the beach, there's this little grass area with a ramp and trees and stuff. And every time I go through there, there's just a slight frame slowdown, and it's just like, I guess it's just too much stuff for the GameCube to draw. It's really fascinating.
Huh.
Let's see here.
I was thinking of some more titles too. I know you guys are big Need for Speed fans. That's another, I think, pretty big title from this era.
Yeah.
It's funny you should mention Need for Speed. Really quick tidbit. The guy who's the announcer for the first couple Need for Speed games, his name's David Kay. And he's...
Oh.
Yeah.
I know that name well.
Yeah, he's my friend at work, Tara. Tara, if you're listening, hey. She's a big Transformers fan, and so that's the voice of Megatron from Beast Wars.
Yeah.
And he's also the announcer for Beetle Venture Racing, but yeah, he does a lot of really prominent voice actor. Does a lot of trailers and stuff. But he was the announcer for the first couple Need for Speed games, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he did a really good job of that was one of the things I really missed from Need for Speed, is that there was the whole idea of the game was the prestige and the behind the cars and stuff, and these were exotics and cars that were normally out of hands of except for the super rich and stuff like that. And that was one of the things I loved about those games the most, because I love those exotics, and you could go into the showroom and look at pictures of the cars, and then David Kay will narrate the Lamborghini Countach is the car that's blah 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 blah. I'm wet now, It's like, you got there was like I said, a prestige, and you really had an appreciation for the cars just by looking at the showcase and stuff, and the gameplay was great too. It's a perfect balance of arcade and simulator, and the cherry on top, and we talked about this briefly. Was the music. I just absolutely adore that music so much, and it's on par with Mega Race for me.
Yeah.
You mentioned too arcade and simulation, and obviously I was talking about how much I loved that Spider-Man game, the one that was based on the TV series that was so great on N64, PS1, and Dreamcast. That was actually built on the Tony Hawk engine, and you might not think about it at first glance, but especially I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, that's another definitive title, and combining arcade and simulation, playing those games. I mean, I think that might be a game we should talk about too, or a series at least, the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever happened to that series?
I think we got run into the ground, but like a lot of other franchises, unfortunately. But I remember 2 was great, and 4 was great, and then I remembered I stopped.
I liked 3 as well. I played a lot of 3 and a lot of 2.
What?
And 4 I didn't play as much, but Underground 1 and 2 I also played a lot of.
Which one?
But then,
which one was the one where it had the bonus level in space, and every time you start the level, there was some god voice off camera and go, "Skate on, my son."
I think that might have been 2, because one of the other cheats I had, because reason why I brought up the Spider-Man thing, not only was it on the Spider-Man engine, I think there was a cheat code to do that space thing where, like you said, there's that voice, but also to wear like the Spider-Man suit and skate around.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I remember
there's
that.
a cheat to unlock Spider-Man. Yeah,
I remember that.
Because I think they were both Neversoft.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And yeah, I remember that. And I remember we would growing up in a Christian household, we would like freak out whenever we die, and this demonic voice would go, "You suck," you know. And we were like, "Oh my God, he said the S word," you know. But that was Neversoft. That's right. I remember playing this on Dreamcast, Razor skating or whatever, and it was these creepy cartoon kids on the Razor scooters.
Yeah.
That was a game.
I never played it, but that always looked terrible.
It was bad. It was bad.
You know, I was remembering, though, there was one that I thought would have been crap, but it was actually pretty good. There were a couple. Aggressive Inline by Acclaim. Did you guys play that? I think that was PS2 era, but that was good.
Hadn't played it, but I've heard about that too. Yeah.
And the Dave Mirra, and there was another one. There's like a red Dave Mirra, and then there's a green. I think it's Jeremy McGrath. Again, Acclaim kind of games like those that were pretty cool.
And then nowadays we have on Xbox One we've got we've got Mark McMorris Infinite Air. Y'all probably never heard of. I think it's an indie title actually. Wait, let me see. I only know it because I tested it on Xbox One, but Infinite Air with Mark McMorris, which is a weird title. It's like Infinite Air. It's like it sounds like a cheat code.
Infinite Air.
I can't remember the.
And it was built on the Unity engine, and you can really tell it was kind of a kind of sloppy.
I remember that any game with like they have game title with celebrity name that always cracks me up, and I know on the Simpsons they did that with like How to Putt with Lee Tervano. I forgot his name or something.
Oh yeah, or he hits the ball. I remember that's what I do in the golf games. Like you're on the green, but all of a sudden by accident you just drive it.
Yeah,
yeah. It like goes like out of bounds.
Yeah.
Would you like to play again?
Yeah.
No. You have answered no.
I like when Bart's like he wants to steal the game, and he's like all the video game characters are popping up, and there's Mario with the accent and stuff, and then he pops up. He's like, "Hey, don't do that, son. How that game's going to improve your putting?" And then Sonic the Hedgehog pops up. Just take it.
We got to get one of those voice clips when we're talking about a bad game, like let's say Superman 64, and just go worst game ever.
Oh man, no! I'll grab a clip from Crazy Taxi. Wow, I can't talk today. Jeez, no, Crazy Taxi. It's like, oh, you suck, I always like that clip.
Oh, and Cameron, you mentioned Resident Evil earlier. I think that's another big franchise from this era. That and the Silent Hill games as well.
Yeah, Resident Evil 2 is that was a huge seller. Yeah, and definitely Silent Hill 2, if nothing else, that's fondly remembered.
I like how they got Sean Bean in eventually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in the movie, yeah.
Oh, you know what? I of course, I'm Lara Croft, Tomb Raider.
Right, yeah. Was there a Saturn version of that?
I think there was. I really do. I don't think there was the second one. I think because the sales just weren't there. But if I remember right, it was on PC, and then they went to PlayStation and Saturn for the first one.
I played the first two. I mean, I played demos of 2 and 3 when I was little. I remember the third one really creeped me out. And actually, that's what I wanted to talk about. Actually, the Tomb Raider games, the original ones were actually really kind of creepy and scary. They were kind of horror games a little bit. They were very dark. The enemies never had any audio. like they would just creep up on you, and all of a sudden there was like an enemy there, like shooting you or hitting you with a stun baton or a baseball bat or something. I remember thinking it was very scary when I was a kid playing Tomb Raider. I don't know.
That's a good point. I never thought about it like that. There were more horror games to start off with.
Yeah, and probably not intentionally either. It was just, but I always, looking back on it now, I really like the atmosphere of the original games because of that. Like, it's just that weird PlayStation atmosphere. Like, like I said, it was very dark and kind of gloomy and a very solitary experience because, like I said, there wasn't a lot of sound. You're just like running through the level. You kind of there's like your hand isn't being held or anything, so you're just like trying to figure out where to go. And you're like, oh, okay, there's like a puzzle here I have to solve. And then there's this enemy attacking me. Oh, I gotta kill this thing. And I liked the atmosphere of the original games.
I don't know if the levels are creepy or the gameplay is creepy, but what is creepy is the promo art for Lara Croft. Woof. There's like 500 polygons for the whole model. Oh god. And like her hairline is like, she looks like she's wearing a wig. She probably is in the model, yeah.
Yeah, but I think most people were just focused on one aspect of the model, which I think was designed perfectly. But
oh my god!
Or
they consisted of like
two aspects.
They consisted of like 2 polygons each.
Oh my god!
In the original games.
Oh lord!
It's like something out of a 1940s movie, you know. Oh, speaking of which, of another crazy game, this era also marked, when N64, Nintendo, they started losing third-party support, and one of the biggest ones to leave Nintendo and go to PlayStation was Square for, like, Final Fantasy and everything, like Final Fantasy 7 and 8. Those are PlayStation exclusives.
Yeah. Well, and then on the flip side, you had Resident Evil, which became a Nintendo exclusive for a short time.
Yeah, on the GameCube, they had all those Resident Evils. Yeah,
and really, like, the Resident Evil 0 and the Resident Evil Remake are still to this day, like, some of the most beautiful games, like some of the best graphics. Very, very ahead of their time.
It
really utilized that hardware well.
And it's interesting you mentioned that because it reminded me, the same guys who did on the GameCube, what was that called? There was this really scary horror game done by the guys who did Too Human. What was it called?
Eternal Darkness.
Eternal Darkness, which was fantastic. But that same team with Dennis Dyack that did Eternal Darkness, they did a remake of Metal Gear Solid 1 with Hideo Kojima exclusive to the GameCube, Twin Snakes.
Silicon Knights.
Silicon Knights, yeah, and that Twin Snakes game is beautiful. I mean, it's just like the Resident Evil remakes. That's another good one exclusive to the GameCube.
Really, when you think about it, it's interesting how, like, we have all these HD remasters nowadays, and we even have reboots and remakes and things, and they hardly really do anything to make it better. It's like, oh, we upped the resolution, we maybe use the uncompressed textures instead of the crappy textures. But the Resident Evil remake and the Metal Gear Solid remake on GameCube, both on GameCube, are really some of the two of the best remakes of all time, just because of like the complete overhaul of the graphics. Because it's not a port; it's actually remaking the game with higher resolution models and textures and everything. But it's the same core gameplay. Of course, in the case of Resident Evil, they added a lot of gameplay too, which also makes it, again, one of the best remakes.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, you're right. They put a lot more effort into it, and they essentially built it from scratch. Keeping the formula the same, but just really making it worth the purchase. I think you make a great point, because today it's just, hey, you want to buy those games you already paid $60 for a few years ago? Well, here they are again for about the same price.
Yeah, they just look slightly better.
The other interesting thing about this era is a lot of new ground broke. I'm not sure it was the first time Rumble happened, but maybe it was. Star Fox 64 with the Rumble pack. Was that the first time we had Rumble?
What year would that have been?
I want to say 97.
I don't know. Let me see when. Because I'm trying to think if that would have been first, or did DualShock come out first?
Maybe they came out the same year. I don't remember, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Let's see, DualShock. Japan in late 97.
Oh, so same year, I guess.
Yeah. So it was about the same time, yeah.
So Sony was the first one to bundle it in, but if I remember right, I'm trying to think once. So you said it was late 97?
Yeah.
I'm looking up Star Fox. That came out June 30th of 97 with the Rumble pack included. So it predates it, but it didn't have it in the controller. So Sony has them there. But yeah, I mean, I just mean there were a lot of... I mean, Mario 64 is another good example with the open world and the analog control. And I think before that, not to promote our own stuff here, but yeah, I kind of got to do that too. Killing Time on the PC version as opposed to the 3DO, that was one of the first open world games too. I mean, that was something that first happened in the mid-90s. I want to say it's Sega Rally Championship. That was one of the first games where, I think if you went on, I think they would slow you down if you went on grass or dirt as opposed to the road. But I think, having it mathematically figured out as opposed to just being slightly slowed down, like having different equations for the different types of friction and surfaces. I think Sega Rally Championship is probably one of the first ones to do that.
Huh.
Yeah,
but
I think it's fascinating how games do that. Like, I remember, like, you could just tell, like, what texture something has, and that changes the it changes the the sounds, or the way that, like, a car driving and stuff like that, it affects the speed and stuff, and that's always been really fascinating how that works to me.
Agreed.
Yeah, because I remember messing around with, the reason why I say that is because I was messing around with that a lot on Source for Team Fortress 2 when I made maps for Team Fortress 2, and it was just fascinating how there was just a text file for your custom texture, and inside that text file denoted what material it should act like when something steps on it or when a bullet impacts it. And it was just, I thought it was just fascinating that this little text file denotes how this material's properties are and stuff like that. And I don't know if other game engines I'm sure there's other game engines that do a different way of implementing it, but I always thought that was a pretty interesting way of doing it like that. But let's see here. But going.
They were,
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, go ahead.
Just really quick, I'm looking up. I got. I'm looking into getting, updating some of my video game consoles to output HDMI or at least RGB, and I have a Nintendo GameCube that is coming back from Canada, and it's been modded to output HDMI, and so I'm really excited about that, and I'm looking into getting RGB output from my Super NES and stuff, and I'm looking up stuff like FrameMeisters and the open source scan converter to see, to figure out like what will be the best way to display my games on TV and stuff like that. And that always fascinates me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting how the FrameMeisters add back in scan lines so you can experience that CRT look. That's another thing too that we lost. Without CRT TVs, you can't do light gun games anymore due to the way,
Right.
with the light flashes and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's very neat how these consoles are being preserved. I mean, I still prefer to play on a CRT personally. Some of these older consoles, it's just got that feel that I like. But as one of you guys mentioned earlier, I think it was Max, there's a lot of TVs that just don't even have composite inputs anymore. So you kind of have to upgrade these if you still want to play them, on the newer HD TVs, or should I say 4K TVs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking about recently, I was thinking about that too, about how if you want the true nostalgic experience of playing these old consoles or even PC games, you need to get CRT. But I was thinking maybe I should look on eBay and see if I could get one. But then I thought, no, because they're so heavy. I mean, it cost a fortune to ship it to me, and then when I eventually move or whatever, I have to lug that thing around with me.
Well, if you do want it, though, I found kind of a neat way. Obviously, there's Craigslist, there's Goodwills, that's an option. But just 10 minutes away from me it's essentially remained furniture from hotels. They get rid of, like, the old hotel furniture, and they'll have these the CRTs. I mean, you can get 36 inches, 32 inches. I mean, like, big ones. You can get small ones. And I think no matter what the size is, they were selling them $25 a piece.
Oh, wow.
And you just pick it up and go. It was amazing. And, they've got the inputs on the back. Some of them only have coaxial, but a few have RCA inputs. And, you can even, some of them even come with the LodgeNet hookups for N64. You can't use it anymore, but it's just neat to see that and that you can pick that up with it. So, I mean, they're going away fast, though, because this was a few years ago when I found some, because they were already starting to bring in old, quote-unquote, 720p HD TVs. That was the new old stock or whatever that they have now.
Yeah, I got really lucky. I got my CRT. I need to grab one of these soon. Speaking of Logitech, there's a GameCube Logitech controller I need to grab because they're starting to go away. Just a little bit, not too much.
Oh, and I'm sorry. I know you're talking about Logitech now, but earlier, I if I said it wrong, I meant to say LodgeNet.
No, you said it right. It's my bad. But I got my CRT.
Sorry. That's a call I have coming in. I forgot about that. I can't believe it. We actually did an hour and a half again.
Oh, wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I guess we should go ahead and wrap up then.
Yeah, if you guys, we'll have to pick this up next time, and we just have too much to talk about. That's the problem.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
lots of content.
I'd rather have that problem.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have. Then like the podcast, like, hey, welcome to the podcast. Okay, bye. That would be bad. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys as always. Hope you enjoyed my little Night Train Guns N' Roses ringtone. We'll take it out from here, or play it out. However O'Reilly likes to put it. But yeah, well, let's we'll pick this up again next time. I mean, it's funny. We set a topic and then we go a million directions. But hey, that's what makes it great because we don't care. We don't play by the rules.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, hey, you can't talk about a single topic for an hour anyway. Well, I mean, I guess you could, but eventually you get stale.
Yeah, exactly, and not us.
Yeah.
I don't think we physically could do it.
Oh boy. Okay.
Well, yeah. Sorry. Like I said, I got to run, but take care, guys, and yeah, we'll pick it up next time.
All right. Yeah, and thank you, listeners, for listening.
Yes. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
All right. See ya.
See ya.